The Gulf Stream dropped 2,000 feet in 3 seconds. Oxygen masks swung like nooses. 14 executives screamed. Victoria Hargrove, CEO of Meridian Aerospace, a woman who controlled a $4 billion empire, clawed at the cabin wall and shouted the words that changed everything. "Can anyone fly this plane?" Silence. Not one of the most powerful people in American aviation answered. Then Marcus Webb stood up. The janitor. The man who'd mopped their floors for 2 years. The man none of them had ever looked in the eye. "I can fly it," he said. Every person on that plane froze. But what none of them knew, what Marcus had buried for 4 years, was that the last time he'd sat in a cockpit, 5 people never walked away. Before we get into this story, drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see just how far the story travels. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. Marcus Webb's alarm went off at 4:15 a.m., same as every morning. He didn't hit snooze. Hadn't hit snooze in 4 years. Snooze was for people who wanted to stay in their dreams, and Marcus Webb's dreams were places he never wanted to be. He swung his legs off the mattress, feet hitting the cold floor of the one-bedroom apartment in Norfolk, Virginia. The baseboard heater rattled, but produced more noise than warmth. He sat there for a moment, hands on his knees, staring at the wall where a framed photo hung slightly crooked. 2 men in flight suits, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning like idiots in front of a C-17 Globemaster. Marcus and Jake Mercer. Bagram Airfield. 6 years ago. A lifetime ago. Marcus looked away. He moved quietly down the short hallway and pushed open the second door. Emma was asleep, her blonde hair fanned across the pillow, one arm wrapped around a stuffed elephant missing an ear. 8 years old. The only reason he got out of bed. The only reason for anything. He pulled the blanket up to her chin, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "See you tonight, baby girl." She stirred. "Daddy?" "Go back to sleep. Mrs. Miller will be here at 7. "You promise you'll come home?" She asked that every morning. Had asked it since her mother walked out 2 years ago. The question gutted him every single time. "I promise." The drive to Meridian Aerospace took 22 minutes. Marcus parked his 2009 Civic in the employee lot. The far lot. The one without lights. The one the janitorial staff used because the closer lots were reserved for people who mattered. He badged in through the service entrance, changed into his gray uniform in the basement locker room, and grabbed his cart. Mop, bucket, cleaning supplies, trash bags. The tools of his trade. The tools of his invisibility. "Webb, you're on 40 today." His supervisor, Gary, didn't look up from his clipboard. "Executive floor. Board meeting at 9, so have it spotless by 7. "Got it." "And Webb?" "Yeah?" Gary finally looked at him. "Stay out of sight. Mrs. Hargrove's in early. You know how she is." Marcus knew exactly how she was. Victoria Hargrove, CEO of Meridian Aerospace, had walked past him 400 times in 2 years. She'd never once acknowledged he existed. Not a nod, not a glance. He was furniture. Less than furniture. Furniture served a purpose she could see. He pushed his cart into the service elevator and rode up to 40. The executive floor was all glass and polished wood, and the kind of silence that money buys. Marcus worked methodically. Bathrooms first, then the conference room, then the corner offices. He was vacuuming the hallway outside Victoria's office when the door opened and she nearly walked into him. "Jesus!" She stepped back, startled, then annoyed. Her eyes moved over him, the way they'd move over a speed bump. "Can you do this earlier? I have calls at 6. Yes, ma'am. Sorry. She was already past him, heels clicking on the floor he'd just polished. He watched her go. $4 billion company, 3,000 employees, and she couldn't spare 2 seconds to learn the name of the man who cleaned her toilet. Marcus finished the floor by 6:45. He was loading his cart back onto the service elevator when he heard the conversation. Derek Lawson, executive vice president, was on the phone in the break room. Door open, voice loud. The kind of man who wanted everyone to hear how important he was. The Alaska trip is locked in. Victoria is taking the G700 out at noon. Full executive team. If we land this defense contract, we're talking $2 billion. $2 billion, Frank. The company's entire future is on that plane. Marcus pushed the elevator button and rode down. Not his world, not his problem. Except 2 hours later, it became exactly his problem. At 10:30, Gary found him in the basement. Webb, I need you at the private airstrip. Loading detail for the executive flight. Heavy equipment, presentation materials, catering. The regular guy called in sick. That's Robert's job. Roberts is puking his guts out. You're it. Truck leaves in 10. Marcus didn't argue. He never argued. He'd learned that arguing required caring, and caring about what people thought of him was a luxury he'd surrendered along with his wings. The Meridian private airstrip was 15 minutes from the main campus. The Gulfstream G700 sat on the tarmac like a monument to wealth. Sleek, white, the Meridian logo gleaming on the tail. Marcus had seen 1,000 aircraft in his life, flown dozens of them, and he still felt the pull. The way a recovering alcoholic feels the pull of an open bottle. He loaded the cargo hold methodically. Presentation equipment, prototype models, sealed crates of technical documents, catering, enough gourmet food for 14 people to eat like kings for a day. The whole time he kept his eyes down, his movements efficient, his presence small. The executives began arriving at 11:30. Town cars and luxury SUVs pulling up to the tarmac like a parade of privilege. Marcus recognized most of them from cleaning their offices. None of them recognized him. Derek Lawson stepped out of a black Escalade, adjusting his tie, talking loudly into his phone. He brushed past Marcus without a glance, close enough that his shoulder clipped Marcus's arm. No apology, no acknowledgement. Marcus was air. Victoria arrived last, flanked by 2 assistants. She walked up the air stairs like she was ascending a throne. The flight crew, Captain Tom Hadley, a silver-haired veteran with 30 years in the cockpit, and First Officer Lisa Nguyen, sharp and precise, greeted her at the door. Captain Hadley, we're early. Weather window? Narrowing, ma'am. If we push departure up 30 minutes, we'll be ahead of the system moving in from the Pacific. Then push it up. Time is money. Marcus was in the rear cargo area, securing the last crate, when he heard the cabin door seal, the hydraulic hiss, the click of the locks. His stomach dropped. He rushed to the internal cargo door that connected to the main cabin, pushed through, and found himself standing in the aisle of a Gulfstream, full of people who were very much not expecting him. 14 heads turned. 14 expressions ranged from confusion to irritation. What the hell? Derek Lawson's voice cut first. Marcus raised his hands. I was loading cargo. The door closed early. I didn't... Are you kidding me? Victoria's voice came from the front, cold as January. She stood from her seat and walked toward him. You're the janitor. Yes, ma'am. I was securing the last... I know what you were doing. She looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a tumor. The door sealed. We can't open it now without resetting the departure sequence, and we don't have time. She turned to Captain Hadley, who had stepped out of the cockpit. Tom, how long to reopen and reset? 20 minutes minimum, ma'am. We'd miss our weather window. Victoria closed her eyes, opened them, made her decision. "Sit in the back," she told Marcus. "Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. Don't even breathe loudly." "Yes, ma'am." Marcus walked to the rear of the cabin. Every eye followed him. He heard the whispers, saw the smirks. Derek leaned over to the executive next to him, Paul Chen, head of engineering, and said, loud enough for Marcus to hear, "Great, now the plane smells like floor cleaner." Laughter. Not much, but enough. Marcus sat in the last seat, next to the cargo bulkhead, and buckled his belt. He stared at the seat back in front of him and thought about Emma, about his promise, about the way she'd asked, same as every morning. "You promise you'll come home?" The engine spooled up. The Gulfstream began to taxi. A voice from across the aisle, quiet, not cruel. "Don't mind them." Marcus turned. A woman in her 40s, Korean-American, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Rachel Kim, director of engineering. He knew her office. She was the only executive who kept family photos on her desk instead of trophies. "They forget that someone has to keep the lights on," she said. "I'm Rachel." "Marcus." She nodded, then turned back to her laptop. But she'd done something no one else had. She'd used his name. The Gulfstream lifted off at 11:47 a.m. Marcus watched through the small window as Norfolk fell away below them. He could feel it in his body. The angle of climb, the thrust-to-weight ratio, the moment the landing gear retracted. His hands gripped the armrests, not from fear, but from memory. Muscle memory. 4 years dormant, but never dead. "Don't," he told himself. "You're not a pilot. You're a janitor. That's all you are now." But his eyes betrayed him. They tracked the instrument panel visible through the open cockpit door. They read the altitude callouts he could hear from the flight deck. They noticed when the aircraft banked 2 degrees too far in the turn, and corrected. Rachel was watching him. He didn't notice, but she was. She'd seen the way his eyes moved, the way his hands responded to the aircraft's motion, the way he tracked every sound from the cockpit with unconscious precision. That wasn't how a janitor sat on an airplane. 2 hours into the flight, the turbulence started. Small at first, coffee ripples. Then harder, laptop shutting hard. Captain Hadley's voice came over the PA. "Folks, we've got some chop ahead. Nothing serious. Keep your belts fastened. Should smooth out in 20 minutes. Marcus looked out the window. The clouds were stacking in ways that made his chest tight. Cumulonimbus towers, anvil-shaped tops, the kind of formation that hid violence inside beauty. "That's not chop," he thought. "That's a cell. A bad one." He said nothing. Who was he to say anything? The janitor with opinions about weather patterns. The turbulence worsened. The Gulfstream shuddered. A few executives grabbed their armrests. Derek Lawson's confident smile faded. Then the lightning started. A flash lit up the cabin, followed by a crack that made everyone flinch. Then another. The aircraft bucked hard left. Someone's coffee launched across the aisle. "Tom?" Victoria called toward the cockpit, her voice controlled but tight. "Working on it, ma'am. We're deviating around the worst of it." Marcus could hear the strain in Hadley's voice. He'd heard that strain before. The sound of a pilot who's realizing the situation is worse than the briefing. Another lightning strike, this one close. The cabin lights flickered. A woman screamed. The aircraft dropped. Sudden, violent, the kind of drop that makes your stomach hit your throat. Then it caught, lurched upward, dropped again. "What's happening?" Derek demanded, his face white. And then the sound Marcus knew better than any sound in the world, because it had lived in his nightmares for 4 years. A deep, shuddering bang from the right side of the aircraft. Not thunder, not turbulence. Engine failure. The Gulfstream yawed right, hard. Passengers were thrown against their belts. Carry-on bags tumbled from overhead. The cabin lights died, replaced by the red glow of emergency strips along the floor. "Engine 2 is out," Lisa Gwynn's voice from the cockpit, professional but razor-edged. "Fire warning on number 2. Executing shutdown." "Confirmed," Hadley responded. "Engine 2 shut down. Fire suppression deployed. Declaring emergency." The cabin erupted, everyone talking at once, shouting, demanding answers. Victoria was on her feet, gripping the seat back, moving toward the cockpit. "Tom, talk to me." "We lost the right engine, ma'am. Bird strike, most likely. We're flying on one engine. It's manageable. We're diverting to—" Another lightning strike hit the aircraft. This one was different. Marcus felt it through the airframe. A deep, electric shudder that ran through every wire, every system, every circuit. The instrument panel in the cockpit lit up like a Christmas tree. Then half of it went dark. "We lost the primary bus," Lisa called out, her fingers flying across switches. "Backup power engaging. Partial avionics failure. I'm losing navigation." "Switch to standby instruments. Get me a heading to the nearest—" Marcus heard it before he saw it. A change in Hadley's voice. A catch. A pause where there shouldn't be one. "Tom?" Lisa's voice, concerned now. "Tom, you okay?" Silence. "Captain? Captain Hadley?" Marcus unbuckled his belt. Later, he'd try to explain why. He'd try to say it was logic, reason, training, but it wasn't any of those things. It was the sound of a first officer calling her captain's name and getting no answer. It was the sound of a cockpit going wrong. He moved up the aisle. Victoria blocked his path. "Sit down, now." "Ma'am, something's wrong with your captain." "I said sit." "Tom!" Lisa's scream cut through everything. "Oh God, I need help. Someone help me!" Victoria's face changed. Marcus pushed past her and reached the cockpit door. Lisa was struggling with the controls, one hand on the yoke, the other reaching for Hadley, who was slumped forward, his body weight pushing the yoke down, the aircraft nosing over. "He collapsed," Lisa gasped. His face went slack and he—" "Stroke," Marcus said. The word came out before he could stop it. He reached past Lisa, grabbed Hadley's shoulder, pulled him back against the seat. The captain's face was ashen, one side drooping. Alive, but gone. Not flying. Not today. "Help me get him out of the seat," Marcus said. "Who the hell are you?" "Help me get him out of the seat, now." Lisa looked at him, really looked, and saw something that made her nod. Together, they unstrapped Hadley. Rachel appeared behind them, and she and another executive pulled the unconscious captain into the cabin. Lisa turned back to the controls, fighting the yoke. One engine, partial electrical failure, a storm trying to tear them apart. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was fast. Too fast. "I can fly single engine," she said, more to herself than anyone. "I've trained for this. I can—" The turbulence hit again, violent, and something broke loose above the cockpit. A ceiling panel, ripped free by the structural stress. It swung down and caught Lisa across the temple. Her head snapped sideways. Her hands fell from the yoke. The Gulfstream nosed over. Marcus caught her as she slumped. Blood ran from her hairline, fast and bright. He eased her back in the seat, checked her pulse, strong, and looked at the instrument panel. Half the screens were dark. The altitude was unwinding. The airspeed was climbing toward redline. The single remaining engine screamed at full power, pushing them toward the Earth at an angle that would kill everyone aboard in about 90 seconds. Marcus didn't think. He sat down in the captain's seat. His hands found the yoke. His feet found the rudder pedals. And for the first time in 4 years, Marcus Webb was in the left seat of an aircraft. The yoke fought him. The Gulfstream was heavy on the right side. the dead engine creating asymmetric drag. He pressed the left rudder, pulled back on the yoke, felt the aircraft resist, then respond. The nose came up. The descent slowed. Behind him, in the cabin, someone was shouting. Victoria's voice. "What is he doing? Is the janitor flying my plane?" "Yes, ma'am," Rachel said from the cockpit door, her voice steady. "And if you'd like to be alive in 2 minutes, I suggest you let him." Marcus didn't hear them. He was somewhere else now. Not Norfolk, not the janitor's closet, not the cold apartment with the broken heater. He was in the sky, where he'd always belonged, where he'd sworn he'd never return. The altitude stabilized at 12,000 feet. The airspeed came back from the red. The aircraft flew, wounded, shaking, one-eyed and limping. But it flew. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding for 4 years. Then he looked at the fuel gauge, at the failed navigation system, at the mountains he knew were somewhere ahead in the darkness and the storm. And he understood something with perfect, terrible clarity. Getting them level was the easy part. Getting them home was going to be the hardest thing he'd ever done. Harder than the last time. Harder than Afghanistan. Harder than losing Jake and 5 soldiers, and his wings, and his wife, and his entire life. Because this time, he'd promised a little girl he'd come home. And Marcus Webb did not break his promises. The yoke trembled in Marcus's hands, like a living thing trying to die. He could feel every wound the Gulf Stream carried. The dead right engine dragging them sideways. The electrical system bleeding out behind the instrument panel. The storm outside hammering the fuselage with fists of wind and ice. The aircraft wanted to quit. He wouldn't let it. "Altitude 11,800, he said aloud, to no one, to himself, to the ghost of every instructor who'd ever screamed numbers at him. "Airspeed 210, single engine, partial electrical, trim compensating." His hands moved across the panel, muscle memory firing 4 years of rust off in seconds. He adjusted the trim to counter the dead engine's drag. He pulled the power back on the remaining engine. Not too much, just enough to stop the asymmetric yaw from worsening. He scanned what instruments still worked, building the picture in his mind of what the aircraft was doing, what it wanted to do, and what he needed to force it to do instead. "You," Rachel's voice from behind him, calm, controlled. "What do you need?" Marcus didn't turn around. "I need someone in that seat." He nodded toward the first officer's chair, where Lisa slumped, unconscious, blood still running from her temple. "Move her out carefully. Support her neck. Then sit down and do exactly what I tell you." Rachel didn't hesitate. She called back into the cabin. "I need 2 people up here, now! Gently. She's hurt." 2 executives appeared. Paul Chen, the head of engineering, and a younger man Marcus didn't recognize. They lifted Lisa with surprising care, cradling her head the way Marcus instructed, and carried her into the cabin. Rachel slid into the right seat, buckled the harness, and placed her hands flat on her thighs. "I don't know how to fly," she said. "You don't need to. See that panel in front of you, those gauges?" "Yes." "You're my eyes. I need you to read me numbers when I ask for them. Fuel quantity. That's the gauge with the needle and the F and E. Altitude. The big dial with the numbers that keep changing. Airspeed. The one next to it. And that red light, 3rd row from the top, 2nd from the left?" "I see it." "If that light starts flashing, tell me immediately. That's the remaining engine's oil pressure. If we lose that, we lose everything." Rachel studied the panel, memorizing positions. She was an engineer. She understood systems, even systems she'd never touched. "Got it. What else?" "Pray." "I'm not religious." "Neither am I. Start anyway." Victoria Hargrove appeared in the cockpit doorway. Her composure had cracked, but not shattered. She was a woman built for crisis, just not this kind. I need to know what's happening, right now. Marcus kept his eyes on the instruments. We've lost the right engine. Bird strike, probably geese. The lightning knocked out half our electrical system, including primary navigation. Captain Hadley had a stroke. First Officer Nguyen has a severe head injury. I'm flying on one engine, partial instruments, in a storm, over terrain I can't see. Can you land? That's the plan. Can you land safely? Marcus paused. One beat too long. I'm going to get us on the ground, ma'am. Victoria heard what he didn't say. Her jaw tightened. What do you need from me? Keep everyone calm. Keep them seated. Keep them belted. And keep them quiet. I need to think. She nodded once and disappeared back into the cabin. A moment later, her voice carried forward. Controlled, commanding, the CEO back in her element. Everyone, listen to me. We have a situation. Our pilots are incapacitated. Mr. Webb is flying the aircraft. He is a former military pilot, and he knows what he's doing. I need everyone seated, belted, and silent. We are going to get through this, but only if we stay calm. A janitor is flying the plane? Derek Lawson's voice pitched high with fear. A janitor? Victoria, this is insane. We need to... There has to be someone else. Call someone. Radio for help. Mr. Lawson, sit down and shut up, or I will have you physically restrained. Silence from Derek. Marcus allowed himself half a second of grim appreciation. Then he keyed the radio. Mayday! 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 This is November 774 Mike Whiskey, Gulfstream G700 out of Norfolk. We have lost one engine, partial electrical failure. Both pilots incapacitated. I am a passenger with military flight experience and have assumed controls, requesting emergency vectors to nearest suitable runway. 16 souls on board. Static. The storm chewed up radio signals like paper. He tried again. Same call, same static. Is anyone hearing us? Rachel asked. Maybe, maybe not. The antenna might be damaged from the lightning. We could be broadcasting into nothing. So, we're alone. Marcus looked at the wall of clouds ahead of them, lit from within by lightning. Mountains somewhere below, fuel draining, one engine, no navigation. Yeah, he said. We're alone. He flew. For 20 minutes he flew in silence, except for Rachel's instrument callouts and the constant battering of the storm. His arms burned. The yoke required constant pressure. Without the autopilot, without the flight computer, without half the systems that made modern flying manageable, he was muscling a 60-ton aircraft through a thunderstorm by hand. Every gust hit him like a punch. Every wind shear tried to rip the yoke from his grip. Fuel at 62%, Rachel reported. Consumption rate? She calculated, lips moving. At this burn rate, roughly 3 hours of flight time. That's if the fuel lines are intact. Check for a fuel flow differential. Is the left wing burning faster than the right? Rachel studied the gauges. I think so. Left side is showing higher consumption. Could be a leak from the lightning strike. Or could be the left engine working harder because it's the only one running. Marcus chewed on this. Either way, we don't have 3 hours. Call it 2 to be safe. 2 hours? How far can we go in 2 hours? Far enough, if I knew where we were. The navigation screens were dead. The GPS was gone. The VOR receiver, the backup system that tracked ground-based radio beacons, flickered intermittently, giving readings that might be accurate or might be garbage. Marcus was flying on compass heading, airspeed, and time. The way pilots flew before computers, before satellites, before any of the technology that Meridian Aerospace built and sold. I need a map, Marcus said. There should be approach plates in a bag behind your seat. Charts. Paper charts. Rachel twisted, found the bag, pulled out a thick booklet of aeronautical charts. These? Open to the section covering British Columbia. We were on a heading of 320 when we entered the storm. We've been flying for approximately, he glanced at the clock, 2 hours and 40 minutes from Norfolk. Cruising speed before the engine failure was roughly 480 knots. After the failure, I've been holding 210. Rachel flipped through the charts, running calculations on the margin with a pen she'd pulled from her jacket. We should be somewhere over central British Columbia, east of the Coast Range. The terrain below us is mountains. Yes, mountains. Lots of mountains. How high? Peaks up to 8,000 feet in this area, some higher. Marcus checked the altimeter. 11,200. They had 3,000 feet of clearance. Maybe. If the altimeter was accurate. If the barometric pressure setting was correct. If the mountains below matched the charts. A lot of ifs. I'm going to try to get above the weather, Marcus said. If I can break out on top, I can orient us visually. Maybe pick up a radio signal. Can this plane climb on one engine? It can, slowly, and it'll burn more fuel. How much more? Enough to matter. He pushed the throttle forward on the remaining engine. The Gulf Stream responded sluggishly, like a horse being asked to gallop with a broken leg. The nose pitched up. The airspeed dropped. The altimeter crept upward. 12,000, 12,500, 13. The storm fought back. A downdraft slammed them, erasing 500 feet of altitude in seconds. Marcus's stomach lurched. He pulled back harder, gave the engine more power. The turbine temperature gauge climbed toward the red. Engine temp is getting high, Rachel said. I see it. How high is too high? Higher than that, but not by much. 14,000 feet. The turbulence eased slightly. 15,000. The clouds thinned, and then, suddenly, beautifully, they broke through. Stars. Millions of them, scattered across a sky so clear and cold it looked fake. The moon hung fat and white, casting silver light across a sea of clouds below them. For one moment, the terror fell away, and there was nothing but the sky. Rachel exhaled. Oh my God! Marcus didn't look at the stars. He looked at the horizon, orienting himself. North was there. The moon's position confirmed the compass heading. Below the cloud deck, invisible but present, the mountains of British Columbia waited like teeth. I need to find a hole in the clouds, he said. Somewhere I can descend safely and look for a place to land. Can't we fly to an airport from up here? We could, if I knew exactly where we are and exactly where the airport is. Without navigation, I'd be guessing. If I guess wrong, we run out of fuel over wilderness with no options. So what do? We look for a break in the weather, a valley, a clearing. Somewhere below the clouds where I can see the ground and find flat terrain. And land in the wilderness. Rachel was quiet for a moment. You've done this before. It wasn't the question. Yeah, Marcus said. I've done this before. He didn't elaborate. Rachel didn't push, but the silence between them filled with the weight of everything he wasn't saying. They flew south, following the cloud tops, searching for a gap. Marcus kept the altitude at 15,000, trading fuel for safety. Every minute burned precious kerosene. Every minute brought them closer to the moment when the remaining engine would cough, starve, and quit. 23 minutes after breaking through the clouds, Marcus saw it. A gap. Not large, but enough. A dark patch in the white sea below where the clouds parted and moonlight hit the ground. There, he said. We're going down. He pulled the power back and began the descent. The Gulf Stream sank back into the clouds, and the turbulence returned, but lighter now. They were on the edge of the storm, not in its heart. "Tell the cabin," Marcus said. "Everyone tight. This is going to be rough." Rachel keyed the cabin intercom. "Everyone, brace for turbulence. Stay belted. Stay calm." They broke through the bottom of the clouds at 8,000 feet. Marcus's eyes swept the terrain below. Moonlit wilderness. Mountains on both sides. And there, a valley, running roughly north-south. A dark ribbon of river or dry bed winding through it. On the valley floor, a flat area. Not much. Maybe 2,000 feet of usable ground, bordered by forest on both sides. "I see it," he said. "Our landing zone." "That?" Rachel looked out the windscreen. "That's barely a field." "It's enough." "For a Gulf Stream?" "We'll find out." He started the approach, dropping landing gear manually when the electric system failed to respond. Rachel helped, pulling the emergency gear handle with both hands until they felt the satisfying thunk of wheels locking into position. "Gear down," Rachel confirmed. "3 green lights." "Flaps." The flap motor groaned, strained, then produced a partial extension. Half flaps. Better than nothing. Worse than everything. Marcus calculated approach speed, runway length, stopping distance. The math was ugly. The field was short. The surface was unknown. Could be hard-packed dirt, could be mud, could be rocks that would shred the tires and cartwheel them into the trees. "Airspeed 140, Rachel called. "Too fast. I need 120. He bled off speed, fighting the instinct to keep the nose up, knowing that too slow meant a stall, and to stall at this altitude meant death. The Gulf Stream descended through the valley like a boulder falling between walls. 500 feet, Rachel said. 400. 3. Marcus could see the field now, lit by moonlight. It was flat, relatively. A few boulders, some scrub. The river, frozen, ran along the left edge. Trees at both ends. 200. 150. 100. "Brace!" Marcus shouted over his shoulder. "Everyone brace!" He heard Victoria's voice in the cabin, repeating the command. Heard the sounds of people grabbing armrests, tucking heads, holding their breath. 50 feet. Marcus held the nose up, feeling for the ground the way a blind man feels for a step. The main gear touched first, hard, jarring. A shock that ran up through the airframe and into his spine. The Gulf Stream bounced, went airborne for a sickening half-second, then came down again. Harder. The nose gear slammed into the dirt. Marcus stood on the brakes. The anti-skid system was dead, no electrical power, so the tires locked, skidded, released, locked again. The aircraft slewed left toward the frozen river. Marcus kicked the right rudder, fighting the skid, feeling the ground tear at the wheels. A boulder, dead ahead. He couldn't avoid it. The right main gear hit it square. The impact ripped through the landing gear assembly. The right wing dipped, scraped the ground, threw a shower of sparks into the darkness. The aircraft spun. Not a complete revolution, just a violent half-turn that slammed Marcus against his harness and sent Rachel's head into the side panel. Then they stopped. The engine was still running. Marcus's hands found the throttle and pulled it to idle, then to cutoff. The turbine wound down with a dying whine. Silence rushed in to fill the void. Silence, and the ticking of cooling metal, and the sound of someone in the cabin crying. "Rachel." Marcus's voice was hoarse. "Rachel, you okay?" She lifted her head from the panel, a red mark on her forehead, but her eyes were clear. Yeah, I'm okay. Are we alive?" "We're alive." "We're on the ground?" "We're on the ground." From the cabin, Victoria's voice, shaking but functional. "Is everyone all right? Sound off. Everyone, sound off." Voices, one by one. 14 passengers, 2 incapacitated crew. All alive. Bruises, cuts, 1 broken wrist. Paul Chen, bracing wrong on impact. But alive. Every single one of them. Marcus sat in the captain's seat, hands still on the yoke, and let the shaking come. It started in his fingers and moved inward until his whole body trembled. He clenched his jaw to keep his teeth from chattering. I didn't kill them. This time, I didn't kill anyone. Then, Jake's voice, clear as if he were sitting in the right seat. That's because you're a damn good pilot, Webb. Always were. Marcus closed his eyes, opened them. The voice was gone. Just the wind outside, the ticking metal, and 16 people breathing, who might not have been. He unbuckled his harness and stood on legs that didn't want to hold him. When he stepped out of the cockpit into the cabin, every face turned toward him. 14 executives, 2 injured crew members propped against the bulkhead. Every eye on the janitor. Nobody said a word. Then Paul Chen, cradling his broken wrist, started clapping. One-handed against his thigh, but clapping. Rachel joined. Then another executive. Then another. Derek Lawson sat motionless, staring at Marcus with an expression that Marcus couldn't read. It might have been gratitude. It might have been shame. Victoria stepped forward. For the first time since he'd known her, 2 years of cleaning her office, polishing her floors, emptying her trash. She looked at him. Really looked at him. "Mr. Webb," she said. "Thank you." Marcus nodded. He wanted to say something meaningful, something worthy of the moment. Instead, he said, "We need to get off this aircraft. Fuel could be leaking. Everyone out, carefully. Watch your step. We don't know what's under us." Because the landing was done, but the surviving hadn't even started. They were somewhere in the British Columbia wilderness. Winter. Night. No communication. No shelter except a damaged aircraft that might be leaking jet fuel. Temperatures already dropping below zero. And somewhere out there, in the cold and the dark and the mountains, Marcus Webb was going to have to become something he'd spent 4 years trying to forget. Not a janitor. A leader. He stepped out of the aircraft into the freezing night air. The snow crunched under his feet. His breath made clouds in the moonlight. Behind him, one by one, the most powerful people at Meridian Aerospace followed the man who cleaned their toilets into the wilderness. None of them complained. None of them questioned. They just followed. The cold hit like a wall, not the polite cold of a Virginia winter morning, but the kind of cold that finds the gaps in your clothing, crawls inside your bones, and starts whispering that you're going to die. Marcus counted heads as they climbed down from the aircraft. 14 executives, 2 injured crew, 16 people total, and not one of them dressed for survival. Tailored suits, silk blouses, Italian leather shoes designed for boardrooms, not frozen wilderness. "Everyone stay close to the aircraft," Marcus said. "Don't wander. The ground is uneven, and we don't know what's out there." "What's the temperature?" Victoria asked. She'd wrapped her arms around herself, her breath coming in white bursts. "-10 Celsius, maybe colder. It'll drop further before dawn." "How much further?" -20, maybe -25. The number landed on the group like a sentence. Paul Chen, clutching his broken wrist, looked at Marcus. "How long can we survive in that?" "Depends on shelter, fire, and whether we keep moving. Without protection, hypothermia sets in within 2 hours at these temperatures. Core body temp drops below 95 degrees and your brain starts shutting down. Below 86 and your heart stops." "Jesus Christ!" Derek Lawson's voice came from the back of the group. He was shivering violently, his thin wool overcoat useless against the wind. So what do we do? Just stand here and freeze? No, Marcus said. We don't. He turned back to the aircraft. The Gulfstream sat at an angle on the valley floor, right wing drooping where the landing gear had sheared. Fuel stained the snow beneath the damaged wing, not pouring, but seeping. A slow bleed. First priority is shelter. The aircraft cabin is our best option, but we need to check for fuel leaks around the fuselage. If fumes build up inside, we'll asphyxiate before we freeze. How do you know all this? Victoria asked. Not challenging, genuinely asking. SEER training. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. Air Force makes every pilot complete it. The word hung between them. Pilot. Not janitor. Not the man who emptied trash cans. Marcus organized them quickly. He sent Rachel and Paul to inspect the far side of the fuselage for leaks. He assigned 2 executives to gather anything useful from the cargo hold. Blankets, food, the catering supplies, anything that could burn. He told Victoria to get everyone back inside the cabin and close the door to conserve body heat. What about you? Rachel asked. I'm checking the emergency equipment. Every aircraft this size carries a survival kit, ELT beacon, and flares. If any of it survived the landing, we have a chance. He crawled under the fuselage, ignoring the fuel dripping onto his uniform, and found the emergency compartment. The ELT, emergency locator transmitter, was intact. Its light blinked steadily, broadcasting their position on the emergency frequency. Whether anyone was listening was another question. The survival kit was there too. Basic but real. Thermal blankets, a first aid kit, signal flares, waterproof matches, a hand crank flashlight, and 4 MREs. Enough to keep 16 people alive for maybe 12 hours. Maybe. Marcus carried the kit back to the cabin and climbed aboard. The executives had arranged themselves in the seats, huddled together, sharing body heat instinctively. Captain Hadley lay across 2 seats near the front, still unconscious, his breathing shallow and uneven. Lisa Nguyen sat upright with a blood-stained cloth pressed to her temple, alert but disoriented. How are you feeling? Marcus knelt beside her. Like someone hit me with a ceiling. Where are we? On the ground, British Columbia wilderness, best I can figure. Who landed the plane? I did. Lisa stared at him. You're the cargo guy. I'm a lot of things. He checked Hadley next, pulse weak but present. Right side of his face still drooping. Classic stroke presentation. There was nothing Marcus could do for him except keep him warm and hope the ELT brought help before the damage became permanent. Paul Chen's wrist was swelling badly. Marcus splinted it with a magazine and strips of cloth torn from his own uniform. Paul winced but didn't complain. You know field medicine too? Paul asked through gritted teeth. I learned after... Marcus caught himself. I took some courses. What he didn't say was why. That after Afghanistan, after Jake, after the 5 soldiers who never walked off his aircraft, Marcus had become obsessed with emergency medicine. If he couldn't fly people to safety, at least he could keep them alive on the ground. It was penance. It was also the skill that got him close to Meridian Aerospace. The janitorial job had been convenient, close to Emma's school. But the real reason he'd applied was that it didn't require a background check that would surface his military record and the questions that came with it. An hour passed. The cabin temperature dropped steadily despite the closed door. People started shivering, then shaking, then going quiet, which was worse. Marcus distributed the thermal blankets, prioritizing the injured and the smallest people first. There weren't enough. We need fire, he said. Not inside. Fumes from the fuel. Outside, near the aircraft, where the heat can radiate toward the fuselage. "I'll help." Derek Lawson stood up. Marcus looked at him, surprised. Derek's face was tight, his arrogance stripped away by the cold and the fear, leaving something raw underneath. "Tell me what to do." "I need wood, dead branches, dry if you can find them. There's forest 30 yards to our right. Don't go further than that. Take someone with you." "I'll go with him," Rachel said. They returned 10 minutes later, arms loaded with branches, Derek's $1,500 overcoat ruined and covered in bark. Marcus built the fire 20 feet from the fuselage, upwind of the fuel leak, using techniques he'd learned in the mountains of Washington State during SEER school. Waterproof matches, tinder from the first aid kit packaging, a careful pyramid of dry wood. The fire caught, the warmth spread. People migrated outside, standing close to the flames, rotating like rotisserie chickens to warm all sides. Someone cracked open the catering supplies. Cold gourmet food, meant for an executive lunch, became survival rations shared by everyone. Marcus watched Derek hand a sandwich to one of the younger executives, a woman he'd been ignoring on the plane. Derek caught Marcus watching and looked away. 3 hours until dawn, Marcus said to Rachel, who'd settled beside the fire. "Search and rescue will need daylight to spot us, even with the ELT. And after dawn? Depends on whether anyone picked up our Mayday or the ELT signal. Could be hours. Could be days." "Days?" Rachel's composure cracked slightly. "We can't survive days out here." "We can. People survive longer than they think. But it won't be comfortable." Rachel pulled the thermal blanket tighter. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah?" "Who are you, really? You're not a janitor who happened to learn how to fly. You landed a crippled Gulfstream in the dark on a field the size of a parking lot. That's not hobby flying. That's not weekend warrior stuff. Who were you before you started mopping floors?" Marcus stared into the fire. The flames danced, casting shadows that looked like other fires in other places. A burning C-17 in the Afghan desert. Fuel and blood, and Jake's boots sticking out from under the wreckage. "I was a pilot," he said. "Air Force. C-17 Globemaster. Heavy transport. I flew cargo, troops, medical evacuations. 15 years, 2,400 flight hours." "That's a career. A real career. What happened?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. The fire popped. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch cracked under the weight of snow. 4 years ago, we were evacuating wounded soldiers from a forward operating base in Helmand Province. 23 people on my aircraft. Night mission. Sandstorm rolled in. 0 visibility, winds gusting to 60 knots. We should have aborted. Command said go. I went. Rachel didn't move. 40 minutes into the flight, engine number 2 flamed out. Sand ingestion. I declared emergency and diverted to a field strip, Camp Bastion Auxiliary. Short runway, 3,200 feet. My co-pilot, Jake Mercer, said it was too short. He wanted me to try for the main base, 20 miles further. Marcus's voice had gone flat. The way a man speaks when he's told a story so many times inside his own head that the words have been sanded smooth of all feeling. I did the fuel calculation. We didn't have 20 miles. We had the field strip or we had nothing. So I committed. Brought her in fast because the crosswind was pushing us off centerline. Touchdown halfway up the runway instead of the threshold. Not enough room to stop. He paused. The fire crackled. We overran. Hit the perimeter barrier at 60 knots. The cockpit crumpled. Jake was on the right side. He took the impact. Marcus swallowed. 5 soldiers in the cargo bay, near the forward bulkhead. They took it too. And you? Broken arm, laceration across my face. Walked away. He said the last two words like they were an accusation. 23 people on my aircraft. 6 didn't walk away. My co-pilot and 5 soldiers. Rachel's hand found his forearm and rested there. She didn't squeeze, didn't pat, just made contact. Human to human. The investigation cleared me, Marcus continued. Mechanical failure, impossible conditions, decision made under duress with incomplete information. The board said I did everything right. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Everything right. 6 people dead, and I did everything right. But you didn't believe them. Jake told me the runway was too short. He was right. If I'd tried for the main base, maybe we run out of fuel. Maybe we crash anyway. But maybe we make it. I'll never know. Because I chose the short runway, and Jake died 30 feet from where I was sitting. So you quit. I grounded myself. PTSD evaluation. They offered me a desk. I walked. Left the Air Force, left my career, left everything. My wife left 6 months later. Said she couldn't live with a man who'd already stopped living. She was right. She took nothing, not even Emma. Just gone. And you became a janitor. I became invisible. That's what I wanted. No cockpit, no decisions, no one depending on me for anything that mattered. Just mop the floor, empty the trash, go home to my daughter. Rachel looked at him in the firelight. You know that's not what happened tonight, right? Tonight, everyone depended on you, and you delivered. Tonight isn't over. Marcus. She used his name deliberately. You saved 16 people. You landed a plane that should have killed us all. Whatever happened in Afghanistan, whatever you think you owe, tonight changed the math. He shook his head. It doesn't work like that. Guilt doesn't do math. Then what does it do? It waits. It waits until you're alone in the dark, and then it reminds you what you did, what you should have done, who's not here because of you. The fire burned lower. Marcus added more wood. Around them, the executives had settled into an uneasy rest, some dozing against each other, some staring at the flames with the hollow expressions of people processing their own mortality. Victoria approached the fire and sat down, folding her long legs beneath her. She'd abandoned her heels and was wearing socks on the frozen ground. The CEO of Meridian Aerospace, sitting in the dirt. Captain Hadley is getting worse, she said quietly. His breathing has changed. It's irregular. Marcus stood and went inside. Hadley's pulse was weaker. His breathing had shifted to a chain Stokes pattern. Deep breaths followed by long pauses. Bad sign. Very bad. He needs a hospital, Marcus said when he came back out. He's had a significant stroke. Without treatment, the brain damage is progressing. If we don't get him to a neurosurgeon within... He checked his watch. Within the next 8 to 10 hours, he won't recover. The ELT is transmitting? Victoria asked. Yes, but I don't know if anyone's receiving. The storm might be blocking the signal. And even if search and rescue picks it up, they need daylight and clear weather to reach us, which means noon at the earliest. That's too late for Tom. Yes. Victoria was quiet. Then, the plane. Can it fly? Marcus had been thinking about it since they'd stepped off the aircraft. He hadn't stopped thinking about it. The question lived in his chest like a second heartbeat, pounding alongside the first. Can it fly? Can it fly? Can it fly? I don't know, he said. The right engine is destroyed. The left is intact, but I don't know if it'll start after the landing impact. The landing gear is damaged. The right main is sheared, so we can't take off conventionally. The flaps are stuck at half extension. The runway, such as it is maybe 2,000 feet of frozen dirt. But can it fly? Maybe. On one engine, lightweight, if we dump everything we don't need, if the left engine starts, if I use every foot of that field, if the surface holds, if the flaps don't jam worse, if 50 things go right and nothing else goes wrong. What are the odds? Marcus looked at her. Honestly? 50-50, and that's generous. Tom will die if we stay. We might all die if we fly. Victoria turned to the fire. The woman who ran a $4 billion company, who made decisions that affected thousands of lives, who'd never once looked at her janitor. She stared at the flames, and Marcus could see her calculating, the same way she calculated market risk and shareholder value and competitive advantage. If we stay, she said slowly, Tom dies for certain. Paul's wrist needs surgery or he risks permanent damage. Lisa's head injury could deteriorate. We have no reliable communication, limited supplies, and dropping temperatures. Rescue is uncertain. That's the situation. And if we fly, we might all die. But we might all live. Also the situation. Then we fly. Victoria looked at Marcus with eyes that had stopped seeing a janitor. Get us out of here, Mr. Webb. Marcus walked to the aircraft in the pre-dawn darkness. He circled it slowly, examining the damage with a hand-crank flashlight. Right engine, destroyed, no question. Right main landing gear, sheared at the strut, wheel and tire gone, just a jagged metal stump. Right wing, scraped along the underside, but structurally intact. The spar wasn't cracked. He checked twice to be sure. Left side, undamaged. Left engine, left gear, left wing, all intact. The fuselage was bent slightly at the aft section, but not compromised. The tail surfaces moved freely when he checked the manual controls. He climbed into the cockpit and tried the left engine start sequence. The battery was weak. The electrical damage had drained reserves, but when he switched to the auxiliary power unit, there was enough juice to crank the turbine. It coughed, sputtered, died. He tried again. Same result. Third try. The engine caught, ran rough for 5 seconds, then smoothed out. The sound filled the valley, a high, clean whine that echoed off the mountains. Marcus watched the gauges stabilize. Oil pressure normal. Turbine temperature nominal. Fuel flow steady. The engine worked. He shut it down to conserve fuel and went back outside. Dawn was breaking, a thin line of gray on the eastern horizon. The valley was visible now, narrow, flanked by forests of pine and spruce, mountains rising on both sides. The field they'd landed on was worse than he'd thought. Rocky, uneven, with a slight upward slope at the far end. Trees at both ends. 2,000 feet, maybe 2,100. A Gulfstream G700 normally needed 5,000 feet to take off. With reduced weight, one engine, half flaps, and divine intervention, Marcus calculated he needed a minimum of 1,800. On a paved, level runway. This was frozen dirt with rocks and a slope. Talk to me. Rachel had followed him out. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we need to lose weight. A lot of weight. Strip the cabin. Seats, panels, catering equipment, cargo, everything that isn't bolted to the structure comes out. I need this aircraft as light as physically possible. How much do we need to lose? Every pound counts. Every single pound. A Gulfstream G700 has an empty weight of roughly 50,000 pounds. We can't change that. But we can dump the interior, the cargo, the supplies. Maybe save 3,000 pounds. 3,000 pounds? Is that enough? It has to be. He gathered everyone outside the aircraft. 16 people, exhausted, cold, scared, looking at him. The janitor, the man who'd been invisible for 2 years. "Here's the situation," Marcus said. "Captain Hadley needs a hospital. The temperatures are dropping. Rescue may come, but we don't know when. I believe the aircraft can fly on the remaining engine, but I need your help." "What kind of help?" Derek asked. "I need every able-bodied person to strip this aircraft down to its bones. Every seat that's not occupied comes out. Every piece of catering equipment. Every panel that can be pried loose. Every pound of cargo. We need to lighten this plane enough to take off from a field that's half the length we need." "Take off?" One of the executives, a woman named Sandra, CFO, looked at the rocky field, at the trees, at the mountains. "From here? That's suicide." "It's a risk," Marcus said. "I won't lie to you. The odds aren't good. But staying here is also a risk, and the odds on that get worse every hour." "How not good?" Derek asked. "The odds. 50-50, maybe less." "You want us to get on a broken airplane, flown by a janitor, with one engine, and take off from a frozen field in the middle of nowhere? At 50-50 odds?" "Yes." "And if we say no?" "Then we wait, and we hope. And Tom Hadley probably dies. And we spend another night at -25 with no food and no fire because the wood runs out." Derek looked at the field, at the aircraft, at Marcus. And then Derek Lawson did something that surprised everyone, possibly including himself. "Tell me which seat to rip out first." They worked for 2 hours. 14 people, most of whom had never held a wrench, tearing apart a $70 million aircraft with their bare hands and the tools from the emergency kit. Seats were unbolted and thrown out the door. Interior panels were pried off. The galley was gutted. Cargo crates were hauled out and abandoned in the snow. Marcus supervised, directing efforts to the heaviest items first. Rachel calculated weight savings on the back of an aeronautical chart, running numbers, updating totals. 2,800 pounds, she reported. Maybe 3,000 if we pull the lavatory fixtures. Pull them. Victoria Hargrove, CEO of Meridian Aerospace, got on her knees in a $70 million bathroom and helped wrench a titanium toilet off its mounting bolts. Her hands bled. She didn't stop. Derek carried seats. Paul, broken wrist and all, dragged catering equipment with one hand. Even Lisa, dizzy and nauseous from her head injury, organized the workflow from inside the cabin, directing people to the heaviest remaining items. By 8 a.m., the Gulfstream was a skeleton. Bare metal floor, stripped walls, no seats except the cockpit chairs and enough cabin seats for 16 people, bolted in a tight configuration near the center of gravity. Everything else lay in a heap on the frozen ground beside the aircraft. Marcus walked the field one final time. He kicked rocks out of the path, marked the biggest obstacles with torn strips of fabric. The takeoff run would start at the south end, rolling north, uphill slightly. The trees at the north end were 60 feet tall. He climbed back aboard. 16 people sat in the stripped cabin on bare metal seats, shoulder to shoulder, belted in with the harnesses that remained. Hadley lay on the floor, secured with cargo straps, still unconscious. Lisa sat against the bulkhead, monitoring him. Rachel took the right seat in the cockpit. Marcus took the left. Fuel? 41%. Enough for roughly 90 minutes. Engine? He started the left engine. It caught on the first try this time, running smooth and strong. The turbine temperature stabilized. Oil pressure held. Engine is good, Marcus said. One engine, half flaps. Damaged airframe. 2,000 feet of frozen dirt with an uphill grade and trees at the end. He paused. Rachel, I need to tell you something. If it's that we might die, I figured that out. No, it's about why I stopped flying. He gripped the yoke. After the crash in Afghanistan, the investigation said it wasn't my fault. Everyone said it wasn't my fault. But Jake, my co-pilot, he told me the runway was too short. He was right. I overruled him. And he died. Marcus, I need to say this, because right now this field is too short. Just like that runway was too short. And I'm about to make the same call I made 4 years ago. Commit to a takeoff that the numbers say shouldn't work. And if I'm wrong, if I get this wrong again, you won't. You don't know that. No, I don't. But I know that 4 years ago, you had no choice. Fuel was out. The short runway was all you had. You didn't make the wrong call. You made the only call. And those 5 soldiers, and Jake, they died because an engine failed in a sandstorm, not because you tried to save them. Marcus's hands shook on the yoke. And right now, Rachel continued, you have 16 people who will die slowly if you don't try. So this isn't about making the same mistake. This is about making the same choice. The only choice. And this time, knowing you're strong enough to live with whatever happens. From behind them, through the stripped cabin, a voice. Quiet, but clear. We trust you, Webb. Derek Lawson. Sitting on a bare metal seat in a gutted airplane, hands on his knees. Fly the damn plane! Marcus closed his eyes. He saw Jake. Not the Jake from the crash. Not the boots under the wreckage. Not the body bag on the tarmac. The other Jake. The one from Bagram, grinning, holding a beer, saying the thing he always said before a mission. Let's go make the impossible look routine, brother. Marcus opened his eyes. Everyone hold on, he said. This is going to be the roughest takeoff of your lives. He pushed the throttle to maximum. The single engine roared. The Gulfstream trembled, straining against the brakes like a racehorse in the gate. Marcus watched the engine gauges peak, held for 3 seconds, then released the brakes. The aircraft lunged forward. The field was rough. Every rock, every rut, every frozen ridge hammered up through the landing gear and into the airframe. Marcus's teeth rattled. The airspeed indicator climbed with agonizing slowness. 60 knots. 70. 80. Halfway, Rachel called. 90 knots. Not enough. He needed 120 to rotate. The trees at the end of the field were getting larger. Fast. Come on, Marcus whispered. Come on, come on. 100 knots. The nose felt light. The wings wanted to fly but couldn't quite grab enough air. The ground was too rough, bleeding speed with every bump. 110. The trees filled the windscreen, close enough to count individual branches. Marcus! Rachel's voice was steady, but her fingers were white on the armrest. 115. Not enough. The math was wrong. The field was too short. Jake was right. The runway is always too short. Then Marcus heard it. A voice that wasn't there. Trust the wing, son. Rotate. Not Jake. Tom Hadley. The captain who lay unconscious behind him, who'd flown for 30 years, whose voice Marcus had heard through the cockpit door during dozens of routine flights. Marcus pulled the yoke back. The Gulfstream's nose lifted. The main gear left the ground. For one sickening moment, they hung. Not flying, not falling, trapped between earth and sky. The stall warning chirped. The trees were right there, close enough to touch. Marcus held the angle, held it, held it. The wing grabbed the air. The aircraft climbed, barely, impossibly, clearing the treetops by what felt like inches. Pine branches scraped the belly of the fuselage with a sound like fingernails on a coffin lid. Then they were above the trees, then above the valley, then climbing into the cold morning sky on a single engine that screamed with effort but refused to quit. Rachel let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. In the cabin, someone was praying. Someone else was crying. Derek Lawson sat perfectly still, eyes closed, hands flat on his thighs, breathing. Marcus leveled off at 10,000 feet and keyed the radio. His voice cracked on the first word. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. November 774 Mike Whiskey, airborne from emergency landing site. Single engine, 16 souls. Requesting emergency vectors to nearest suitable airport. How copy? Static. Then, a voice. Clear and beautiful and real. November 774 Mike Whiskey, this is Vancouver Center. We have you on radar. Say your status. Marcus closed his eyes, opened them. The sky was blue ahead of them, the storm behind them, and somewhere on the ground, an airport with a runway long enough and flat enough and safe enough to bring these people home. Vancouver Center, Marcus said. We are damaged. Single engine, low fuel, 16 souls, 2 critical injuries. We need the nearest runway you've got and everything you can send to meet us. Copy 774, Smithers Airport, bearing 340, 92 nautical miles. Runway length 6,000 feet. Emergency services are being notified. Turn left heading 340 and maintain 10,000. We'll bring you in. Roger. 340. 10,000. Marcus turned the aircraft gently, nursing the wounded Gulfstream onto its new heading, and pointed the nose toward Smithers, toward a runway, toward the ground, toward home. The hardest part was over. Or so he thought. 92 miles, 41 minutes at their current airspeed. Marcus did the fuel math 3 times, hoping the answer would change. It didn't. Fuel shows 36%, Rachel said from the right seat. Consumption rate? Higher than it should be. The left engine is working overtime, compensating for the dead right. At this burn rate, we have... She paused, calculating. 50 minutes, maybe 55. And Smithers is 41 minutes out. That gives us a 9-minute margin. 14 minutes if the gauges are accurate, which they might not be, given the electrical damage. Rachel absorbed this. So we might have 55 minutes of fuel, or we might have 40. Welcome to aviation. Marcus held the aircraft steady at 10,000 feet, nursing the single engine, keeping the airspeed at the most fuel-efficient setting he could manage. Every knot of speed cost fuel. Every foot of altitude cost fuel. The Gulfstream was bleeding kerosene the way Hadley was bleeding time, and both clocks were running out. Vancouver Center, 774 Mike Whiskey, requesting current weather at Smithers. 774, Smithers is reporting ceiling 2,000 broken. Visibility 8 miles. Winds 170 at 12, gusting 20. Temperature -8 Celsius. Runway 33, ILS approach available. Crosswind. Not terrible, but not nothing either. And the gusts meant turbulence on the approach, which meant fighting the controls, which meant more workload on the one engine, which meant more fuel burn. Copy, Vancouver. We'll take the ILS 33. 774. Be advised, emergency equipment is in position. Crash, fire, rescue standing by. Medical teams on the ground. Appreciate that, Vancouver. Marcus clicked off the radio and sat in silence for a moment. Crash, fire, rescue. Standard procedure for an emergency landing. But hearing the words spoken aloud made the situation concrete. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a simulator. 16 people were sitting behind him in a stripped-out aircraft with one engine and a pilot who hadn't held a valid license in 4 years. "You're thinking too much." Rachel was watching him. "I can see it. Your jaw does this thing when you're spiraling." "My jaw doesn't do a thing." "It absolutely does. Talk to me. What's the approach plan?" Marcus exhaled. She was right. Thinking was the enemy right now. Flying was the job. Standard ILS approach. We'll intercept the localizer about 15 miles out. Pick up the glide slope and follow it down. The ILS will give us lateral and vertical guidance to the runway, even if we can't see it until the last minute. That sounds straightforward. It would be in a normal aircraft with 2 engines and full systems. In this aircraft, I'm hand-flying everything. No autopilot, no flight director. I'll be tracking the ILS needles manually while managing a single engine, partial hydraulics, and whatever other surprises this plane has left. What about the landing gear? The question Marcus had been avoiding. That, he said, is what I'm worried about. The right main landing gear was gone, sheared off during the wilderness landing. The left main and the nose gear should extend normally, assuming the hydraulic system, which was already compromised, had enough pressure left to push them down. There's a manual backup, Marcus said. Emergency gear extension. It's gravity-based. Release the up locks and let the wheels fall into position. But the right side has no wheel to fall, which means we're landing on 2 gear instead of 3. What happens when a plane lands on 2 gear? If I do it right, we touch down on the left main and nose gear, keep the right wing up as long as possible, and let it settle slowly as we decelerate. The wingtip will scrape the runway, but the aircraft stays upright. It's survivable. And if you don't do it right? The wing digs in, the aircraft cartwheels, and we all die in a fireball. He said it flat, matter of fact. So I'm going to do it right. Rachel nodded. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't offer hollow reassurance. She just nodded. Marcus found himself grateful for her in a way he hadn't been grateful for another person in years. 30 minutes to Smithers, she said. Let's brief the cabin. Marcus keyed the intercom. Everyone, listen carefully. We're 30 minutes from Smithers Airport. We're going to make an emergency landing. Here's what you need to know. We've lost our right landing gear. That means we'll be landing on 2 wheels instead of 3. The touchdown will be normal on the left side, but the right wing will eventually contact the runway. There may be sparks, noise, and a significant pull to the right. Stay belted. Stay braced. Keep your heads down when I give the command. He paused, then added, We're going to be fine. Just do what I say, when I say it. He clicked off before anyone could ask questions. The cabin didn't need questions right now. It needed certainty, even manufactured certainty. Victoria appeared at the cockpit door. How's Tom? Still unconscious. How does he look? His breathing is getting worse. That pattern you described, the stops and starts, it's happening more often. Marcus checked his watch. Hadley had been without medical care for nearly 5 hours. Every minute increased the risk of permanent damage or death. 28 minutes, Marcus said. Hang on for 28 more minutes. Victoria didn't leave. She stood in the doorway, gripping the frame, and said something Marcus didn't expect. I owe you an apology. Ma'am, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. Because if something goes wrong in 28 minutes, I want to have said it. She steadied herself. 2 years. You worked in my building for 2 years. I walked past you hundreds of times. I never once asked your name. I never once wondered who you were or what you'd done before you started cleaning my floors. I looked through you like you were glass. You don't need to. Yes, I do. Because you're not glass, Mr. Webb. You're the only reason any of us are still breathing, and I treated you like you didn't exist. Her voice cracked on the last word. She caught it, controlled it, rebuilt her composure. So, I'm sorry, for what that's worth. It's worth a lot, Marcus said quietly, but save the rest for after we land. I'm going to need you to keep everyone calm during the approach. She nodded and returned to the cabin. Marcus heard her voice, steady and authoritative, preparing the passengers. 20 minutes out. The fuel gauge continued its relentless slide toward empty. Marcus watched it the way a man watches a clock in a hospital waiting room. Unable to look away, unable to make it slow down. Fuel at 22%, Rachel reported. Consumption? Steady. We should make it with 6 or 7 minutes of reserve. Should. 15 minutes out. Vancouver Center handed them off to Smithers Approach Control. A new voice, young, professional, tinged with the careful calm of someone who knows people might die on their frequency. November 774 Mike Whiskey, Smithers Approach. Radar contact. You are cleared for the ILS runway 33 approach. Report established on the localizer. Cleared ILS 33, 774. Marcus began the descent. The Gulf Stream dropped through the cloud layer, bumping through turbulence that jostled the stripped cabin. He tracked the ILS needles on the one instrument display that still functioned. 2 crosshairs, one horizontal, one vertical, guiding him toward the runway like a target. I need the gear down, Marcus said. Rachel, see that handle between us? The yellow and black striped one? Yes? That's the emergency gear release. When I say so, pull it hard toward you and hold it. Got it. 10 miles out. The aircraft descended through 4,000 feet. Clouds thinned. Marcus caught glimpses of terrain below. Mountains, forest, a town. Smithers. Close now. Gear down, Marcus said. Rachel grabbed the emergency handle with both hands and pulled. The mechanism resisted, then gave. They heard the thunk of the nose gear dropping into position. A second thunk, the left main gear. No third thunk. Nose gear down, Marcus confirmed, checking the indicator. Left main, down. Right main. He looked at the indicator light. Nothing. No green light, no red light. The gear was gone. Nothing to extend, nothing to indicate. So that's it, Rachel said. 2 gear. 2 gear. Marcus slowed the aircraft, extending the half flaps that were still functional. The airspeed bled off. He adjusted the engine power to maintain the glide slope. 774 Smithers Tower. You're number 1 for the runway. Winds 180 at 15, gusting 22. The runway is foamed for your arrival. Emergency crews standing by. Copy, Smithers. 774 on the ILS. They broke through the clouds at 1,800 feet. And there it was, Smithers Airport, the runway stretching ahead of them. A white line of foam covering the right side where the wing would contact the ground. Red and blue emergency lights flanking both sides. Fire trucks, ambulances. The entire town's emergency response laid out like a welcome mat. I see the runway, Rachel said, her voice breaking. I see it. 5 miles out, Marcus made his final calculations. He needed to land on the left side of the runway, touch the left gear first, hold the right wing up with aileron input, and keep the aircraft straight with the rudder as the wing settled. The moment the right wing touched the foam, the drag would pull them right. He'd have to fight it with everything he had. The wind gusted. The aircraft rocked. Marcus corrected, hands and feet moving in concert, the dance coming back to him like breathing. 3 miles, airspeed 125. Give me 115. Slower is better for this. He pulled the power back slightly. The engine note dropped. The runway grew larger in the windscreen. 2 miles, 115. Everyone brace, Marcus called to the cabin. Heads down, arms crossed. Brace, brace, brace. Victoria's voice echoed the command. The cabin went silent. 1 mile. Marcus could see individual markings on the runway now. The threshold numbers, the center line, the foam glistening white and wet on the right side. Emergency vehicles tracking alongside. He drifted left, lining up with the left edge of the runway. The left gear needed to touch first, on the left side, giving him maximum runway width before the right wing came down. 500 feet. The Gulf Stream wobbled in the gusting wind. Marcus held it, his arms screaming with fatigue. 4 years of rust fighting against 15 years of training. 300 feet. 200. And then the memory came. Not like the flashbacks, not the crash, not the fire, not Jake. A different memory. Older. Better. His first solo landing. Vance Air Force Base, Oklahoma. 23 years old. The instructor had climbed out of the T-6 Texan and said, "It's your airplane, Lieutenant. Go fly it and bring it back in one piece." Marcus had been terrified. His hands had shaken on the controls, but he'd taken off, flown the pattern, and brought the aircraft back to Earth in a landing so smooth that the instructor had said just 2 words. "Nice job." 23 years old, hands shaking, heart pounding, and he'd brought it home. He could do this. He'd always been able to do this. 100 feet. The runway filled the windscreen. Marcus pulled the power to idle. The engine went quiet. The only sound was the wind. 50 feet. He flared, raising the nose, bleeding off the last of the airspeed. The left main gear reached for the runway. 30 feet. 20. The left main gear kissed the pavement. Smooth. Controlled. Marcus held the right wing up with full left aileron, keeping the aircraft balanced on one wheel, his entire body straining against the controls. The nose gear came down next, gentle, firm, on centerline. They rolled. 200 miles an hour. 150. 100. Marcus held the wing up. His arms burned. Sweat ran into his eyes. The aircraft wanted to tilt right, wanted to drop the wing, wanted to give in to gravity and physics and damage. He wouldn't let it. 80 knots. 60. The right wing began to settle despite everything he did. Gravity was winning. 50 knots. The right wingtip touched the foam. The sound was terrible, a grinding, scraping, shrieking protest of metal on concrete. Sparks flew despite the foam. The aircraft pulled right. Marcus slammed the left rudder, brakes on the left gear, fighting the yaw. 40 knots. 30. The wings scraped along the foam, slowing them, pulling them right. Marcus held the center line. Held it. Held it. 20 knots. 10. The Gulf Stream rolled to a stop. The right wing rested on the runway, bent but not broken. Foam and sparks and smoke. But the aircraft was upright. The cabin was intact. Every soul on board was alive. Marcus sat in the captain's seat and tried to take his hands off the yoke. They wouldn't move. His fingers were locked, cramped into position, refusing to release. He had to peel them off one at a time, each finger a separate act of surrender. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then Rachel made a sound, somewhere between a laugh and a cry, and grabbed his arm. "You did it! Oh my God, Marcus, you did it!" From the cabin, noise. Not screaming, not panic. Cheering. Crying. The sound of 16 people realizing they were alive when they shouldn't be. Fire trucks sprayed foam over the aircraft. Emergency crews surrounded them. The cabin door was open from outside, and paramedics flooded in, going straight for Hadley, then Lisa, then Paul, working with the efficient urgency of people who do this for a living. Marcus unbuckled and stood. His legs gave out immediately. Rachel caught him, steadied him, held him upright until the feeling came back. "I'm okay," he said. "You're shaking." "I know." He walked into the cabin. The executives were being helped out by rescue workers, blankets, stretchers, a line of ambulances. Derek Lawson sat in his stripped metal seat, staring at his hands, tears running down his face. Not crying from fear, from relief. From something else. Something that looked like shame dissolving. Derek looked up as Marcus passed. Their eyes met. "Webb," Derek's voice was raw. "This morning I called you the janitor." "You did." "I was wrong. About that, and about a lot of things." He swallowed hard. "My father was a mechanic, worked on cars in Dayton, Ohio his whole life. Hands like sandpaper. I spent my entire career trying to pretend I didn't come from that. Trying to pretend the people who work with their hands are less than the people who work with their mouths." He shook his head. "He would have been ashamed of me today. And he would have been proud of you." Marcus extended his hand. Derek took it. Held it longer than a handshake requires. "Go call your father," Marcus said. "He died 8 years ago. Then go call whoever you've been too proud to call." Derek nodded, released his hand, stood and walked off the aircraft into the cold Canadian morning. Hadley was rushed to the ambulance first, sirens already wailing before the doors closed. Lisa walked out on her own power, a paramedic at each elbow, her head bandaged, but her eyes clear. She stopped when she saw Marcus at the top of the air stairs. "They told me what you did," she said. "Both landings." "You'd have done the same." "I'd like to think so, but I don't know. What I do know is that Tom is alive because of you. We all are." She reached up and touched his arm. "Hell of a landing, Webb. Hell of a landing." Victoria was the last executive off. She stood at the base of the air stairs, looking up at Marcus, who still hadn't come down. He stood in the doorway of the gutted aircraft, the cold wind cutting through his janitor's uniform, and looked out at the runway, the foam, the emergency vehicles, the mountains beyond. "Mr. Webb," Victoria called up, "are you coming down?" "In a minute." She waited. She understood. Marcus looked back into the cockpit, the left seat where he'd sat, the yoke where his hands had been, the instruments, some dark, some still glowing. This ruined, beautiful, impossible machine that had carried 16 people from death to life. "Thanks," he whispered to it, to the aircraft, to whatever part of Jake and Tom and his old self had been sitting beside him in that cockpit, guiding his hands, steadying his nerves. Then he walked down the air stairs, and his boots hit the tarmac, and he was on the ground. A woman from the airport authority approached. "Sir, you're the pilot?" "I was today." "We need your information for the incident report. Name, license number, ratings." "He'll give you everything you need," Victoria interrupted, stepping between them, "after he makes a phone call. His daughter is waiting." The woman hesitated, then nodded. Victoria handed Marcus her cell phone. "It has signal here. Call her." Marcus's hands were still shaking. It took 3 tries to dial Mrs. Miller's number. It rang twice. "Hello?" "Mrs. Miller, it's Marcus. Is Emma—" "Daddy?" Emma's voice. She'd grabbed the phone before Mrs. Miller could respond. 8 years old, and she already had the instincts of someone who'd been waiting for bad news her whole life. "Hey, baby girl." "Daddy, where are you? You didn't come home. You promised. You promised you'd come home." "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Something happened at work. I'm going to be late." "How late?" "A day, maybe. But I'm okay. I'm safe." "Are you telling the truth?" Marcus looked down at his hands, blistered from the yoke, dirty, trembling. Looked at the airport around him, the ambulances, the foamed runway, the broken aircraft. "Yeah, Em, I'm telling the truth." "Okay." A pause, then smaller. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "You sound different." "Different how?" She thought about it, with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can bring to a question. "You sound like you did in the old videos. The ones where you're wearing the green suit and standing next to the big airplane. You sound like that, Daddy." Marcus closed his eyes, his throat locked. He couldn't speak for several seconds. "I love you, Emma." "I love you too, Daddy. Come home soon." "I will. I promise." He ended the call and handed the phone back to Victoria. She took it without a word. She didn't ask about the tears on his face. She just stood there, beside him, in the cold, on the tarmac, while Marcus Webb let himself feel, for the first time in 4 years, what it meant to be alive. Not just breathing, not just existing, not just surviving from one gray morning to the next, mopping floors and hiding from the sky. Alive. A paramedic approached for the blanket. Marcus took it, wrapped it around his shoulders, and followed the rescue workers toward the terminal. Behind him, the Gulfstream sat on the runway, right wing down, foam-covered, broken, finished. It would never fly again. But it had flown one last time, when it mattered most, with a janitor in the captain's seat and 16 souls in the back. And every single one of them had walked away. The hospital in Smithers was small, 30 beds, a handful of doctors, built to handle logging accidents and ski injuries, not a mass casualty event from a corporate jet crash. But they rose to it. Every nurse, every doctor, every orderly on shift, mobilized within minutes of the call. Marcus sat in the waiting room on a plastic chair, a blanket still around his shoulders, a cup of coffee in his hands that he hadn't touched. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He hadn't noticed. A doctor emerged from the ICU at 3:47 p.m. Young guy, maybe 35, with the kind of exhaustion on his face that meant he'd been fighting hard. "Family of Captain Hadley?" Victoria stood. She'd been pacing the hallway for 2 hours, still in her ruined suit, still in her socks, refusing to sit. "I'm his employer. His wife is being flown in from Virginia. What's his status?" "He had a significant ischemic stroke, left middle cerebral artery. We've administered TPA, that's the clot-busting medication, and we're seeing some response. The fact that he received treatment within 6 hours is the difference between recovery and permanent disability." "He'll recover?" "It's early, but the window that mattered, we made it. Barely." The doctor looked past Victoria to Marcus. "You're the pilot?" "I'm the—" Marcus stopped. He'd been about to say janitor. Force of habit. "Yeah, I'm the pilot. Getting him here when you did saved his life. Another 2 hours, and we'd be having a very different conversation." Marcus nodded, took a sip of cold coffee, set it down. Lisa Nguyen was released that evening with a moderate concussion, strict orders to rest, and a headache she described as the worst hangover of my life, and I've had some legendary ones. Paul Chen's wrist was set and cast. The other passengers were treated for minor injuries, exposure, and shock, then released to a hotel the airport authority had arranged. Marcus refused treatment. He had blisters on his hands, a bruise across his chest from the harness, and a fatigue so deep it lived in his bones. But he refused. "I need to get home," he told the nurse. "My daughter's waiting." "Sir, you need rest. At minimum, let us check you for—" "I need to get home." Victoria found him in the lobby, trying to figure out how to get from Smithers, British Columbia, to Norfolk, Virginia, with no money, no ID, it was in his locker at Meridian, and no way to book a flight. "I've chartered a plane," she said. "Leaves in an hour. You're on it." "I can't afford Marcus." First time she'd used his first name. "Stop. You saved my life. You saved Tom's life. You saved everyone's life. You're getting on that plane if I have to carry you myself." He got on the plane. A small charter, 2 pilots who looked at him with a mix of awe and curiosity. Word had already spread through the aviation community. They offered him the jump seat in the cockpit. He declined, sat in the back, closed his eyes. He didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the instruments, the trees rushing toward the windscreen, the foam on the runway. But underneath those images, for the first time in 4 years, he didn't see Jake. Not because Jake was gone, but because Jake was quiet. The screaming had stopped. The accusation had stopped. Whatever debt Marcus believed he owed, something had shifted in the ledger. The charter landed at Norfolk International at 2:14 a.m. Mrs. Miller's car was in the parking lot. Victoria had called ahead, arranged everything. The older woman was asleep in the driver's seat, Emma curled up in the back under a blanket. Marcus opened the rear door, and Emma's eyes flew open. "Daddy!" She launched herself at him with the full-body commitment only a child can manage. Arms around his neck, legs around his waist, face buried in his shoulder. Marcus held her so tight, his bruised chest screamed. He didn't care. "You came home," she whispered. "I promised." "You smell weird." He laughed. It surprised him, the sound coming out of his own mouth. Genuine, unforced. "It's been a long day, baby girl." "The longest?" "The longest." He carried her to Mrs. Miller's car, buckled her in, thanked the older woman who waved off his gratitude, and drove them home. Emma fell asleep again before they left the parking lot, her hand wrapped around Marcus's finger. He carried her inside, put her to bed, and sat on the floor beside her mattress in the dark. He sat there for 2 hours, listening to her breathe, watching the rise and fall of her chest, feeling the weight of everything he'd done and everything he'd almost lost. At 4:15 a.m., his alarm went off. The same alarm, the same time. Marcus reached over and turned it off. He didn't go to work. The first call came at 8 a.m., a reporter from the Associated Press. Marcus didn't answer. The second came at 8:07, CNN, then Fox, then NBC. By 9 a.m., his phone had rung 31 times. He turned it off. Emma woke up at 8:30, found him in the kitchen making pancakes, the only breakfast food he could cook reliably, and climbed onto her stool at the counter.
"Daddy, why aren't you at work?"
"I'm taking a day off."
"You never take days off."
"Today I am." She studied him with those clear blue eyes that missed nothing.
"Something happened. At work. Something big."
"Yeah, Em, something big."
"Are you in trouble?"
"No, sweetheart, I'm not in trouble."
"Then why do you look like you've been crying?"
Marcus set down the spatula and sat across from her. 8 years old. Too smart for her own good. Too old for her age, because life had made her that way. Absent mother, struggling father, growing up in a one-bedroom apartment with a man who'd been sleepwalking through his own life. Emma, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago.
Okay.
You know the bedtime stories I tell you? About the pilot who flies the big airplanes?
Captain Marcus, the brave pilot who flies through storms and rescues people.
She smiled.
Those are my favorite.
Those stories, they're not made up, Em. Captain Marcus is me. Was me. Before you were born, before I started working at Meridian, I was a pilot in the Air Force. I flew the biggest planes they had, C-17 Globemasters. I flew soldiers and supplies, and I was... He stopped. Started again. I was good at it. Really good. Emma's eyes went wide.
You were a real pilot?
Yeah. Like a real pilot? With a uniform and everything? Green flight suit, wings on the chest, the whole thing.
Why did you stop?
And there it was, the question he'd been running from for 4 years, asked by the only person whose answer mattered. Because something bad happened. On my last flight. Some people got hurt, and I thought it was my fault. So I stopped flying, and I started doing something where nobody depended on me, where I couldn't hurt anyone.
The mopping.
The mopping. Emma was quiet for a long time. She picked at her pancake, dragging her fork through the syrup, drawing patterns. Finally, she looked up.
But you flew yesterday, didn't you?
It wasn't a question.
How did you know?
Because you sound like Captain Marcus now. You didn't sound like Captain Marcus before. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Yeah, Em. I flew yesterday. The pilots on our plane got hurt, and nobody else could fly it. So I did. And I brought everyone home safe.
Everyone?
Every single one. Emma squeezed his hand.
Are you going to fly again?
I don't know.
I think you should.
Yeah?
Yeah, because Captain Marcus isn't just a bedtime story, Daddy. He's you. And I think you forgot that.
Marcus pulled his daughter into his arms and held her while the pancakes burned on the stove and the smoke detector screamed, and neither of them cared. The media found him anyway. By noon, the story was everywhere. Janitor saved 16 lives in dual emergency landing. The footage from Smithers, cell phone video shot by an airport worker, showed the Gulfstream touching down on 2 wheels, the right wing scraping the foam, sparks and smoke, the aircraft sliding to a stop. 12 million views in 6 hours. Marcus didn't watch it. He took Emma to the park. On the second day, Victoria called from a number he didn't recognize. I know you're avoiding calls. I'm asking for 5 minutes. Victoria, I appreciate everything, but Tom Hadley is awake. He's talking. Doctors say he'll make a full recovery. He asked me to tell you something. Marcus waited. He said, and I quote, "Tell that janitor he greased the landing better than I could have. And tell him I heard him up there, talking me through it. Even when I was under, I heard him." Marcus's throat tightened. He'd talked to Hadley during the approach, the unconscious captain who couldn't hear him, whose voice he'd imagined saying, "Rotate," at the critical moment. Except maybe it hadn't been imagined. "Tell him thanks," Marcus managed. "Tell him his voice was in the cockpit when I needed it." "I will. And Marcus, I need to see you. Not today, not tomorrow, whenever you're ready. But I have something I want to discuss, and it's not a thank you card." He agreed to meet her the following week. On the third day, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten. "Webb, I called my brother. Haven't spoken to him in 6 years. He's a plumber in Dayton. Works with his hands like my old man. I told him I was sorry for being ashamed of where I come from. He told me to shut up and come home for Thanksgiving. I'm going. Thank you for showing me what a real man looks like. It's not the suit. It was never the suit. Derek Lawson. Marcus put the letter in the drawer beside Jake's photo. On the 5th day, Rachel called. Not about the crash, not about the company. She called to ask if he and Emma wanted to have dinner.
My daughter's 9, Rachel said. Her name is Sophie. She's been asking to meet the pilot her mom flew with. I may have told her a slightly dramatized version of events.
How dramatized?
There may have been dragons involved.
Marcus laughed. Emma would love that. They had dinner that Friday. Italian place. Nothing fancy. The girls hit it off instantly, the way children do, bonding over shared opinions about which Disney movie was the best and which was overrated. Marcus and Rachel talked about everything except the crash. Books, music, their kids, the particular exhaustion of single parenthood. At the end of the night, walking to their cars, Rachel stopped him. "You're different," she said, "from the man on that plane, the one who sat in the back with his head down." "That man's still in here." "Maybe, but he's got company now." The meeting with Victoria happened on a Tuesday, 10 days after the crash. Not at Meridian headquarters, at a small conference room at the Norfolk Airport overlooking the runway. Marcus noticed the location and understood it was deliberate. Victoria sat across from him. She looked different, still sharp, still commanding, but the edges had softened. Not weakness, recalibration. The kind of change that happens when someone brushes against death and decides to live differently. "How's Emma?" she asked first. "She's good. She's telling everyone at school her dad is a pilot." "She's not wrong." Victoria slid a folder across the table. "Meridian is restructuring our flight test division. We build some of the most advanced avionics systems in the world, and we need pilots who can test them under extreme conditions. Pilots who've handled real emergencies, not simulations. Pilots who can think when everything is breaking." Marcus opened the folder. Employment offer. Test pilot, Meridian Aerospace Flight Test Division, a salary that made him blink 3 times. "This isn't gratitude, Marcus. This is business. I watched you fly a crippled aircraft with 1 engine, no instruments, and no landing gear. You performed 2 emergency landings in conditions that would have killed most professional pilots. The FAA is already talking about using your wilderness landing as a training case study. I don't have a current license. We'll sponsor your recertification. Full medical, full check ride, instrument renewal. The FAA has already indicated they'll expedite given the circumstances. The investigation into the crash is ongoing, but preliminary findings are mechanical failure and bird strike. No pilot error. Not on Hadley's part, not on yours. In fact, the NTSB investigator told me off the record that what you did was, and I quote, "the most extraordinary piece of airmanship he's reviewed in 20 years." Marcus stared at the offer. The numbers. The title. Test pilot. Not janitor. Not invisible. Not hiding. "There's one more thing," Victoria said. "I've established a scholarship fund, the Mercer Webb Aviation Scholarship, for military veterans transitioning to civilian aviation careers, named for you and your co-pilot." Marcus looked up sharply. "How do you know about Jake?" "Rachel told me. I hope that's okay." It should have felt like a violation. It didn't. It felt like Jake's name being spoken aloud in a room where it belonged. "The fund is endowed with $2 million from my personal accounts," Victoria continued. "Not from the company. From me. Because 10 days ago,
I was a woman who walked past people without seeing them, and a man I never saw saved my life. I can't undo that, but I can make sure other people like you don't fall through the cracks." Marcus closed the folder, not because he didn't want the job, because he needed a moment before his voice would work. "I need to think about it," he said. "Take your time." He took 3 days. He talked to Emma. He talked to Rachel. He drove to Arlington National Cemetery and stood at Jake's grave for 2 hours, talking to a headstone, because the man underneath it was the only person who'd ever truly understood what flying meant to him. "I'm scared, Jake," he said. "Not of crashing, not of failing. I'm scared that I'll get back up there and remember how good it felt, and I'll have to admit that I wasted 4 years hiding from the thing I was born to do." The headstone didn't answer, but the wind picked up, coming from the east. The kind of steady crosswind that used to make Jake grin and say, "Perfect day for flying, brother." Marcus smiled. "Yeah, I hear you." He called Victoria the next morning. "I'm in." 6 weeks later, Marcus Webb stood on the tarmac at Meridian Aerospace's private test facility in Mojave, California. New flight suit, new boots, the Meridian wings embroidered on his chest. In his left breast pocket, a photograph. Him and Jake at Bagram, grinning like idiots. In his right pocket, a drawing Emma had made. A stick figure with a big head standing next to an airplane. Underneath, in crayon, "My daddy the pilot. For real this time." Tom Hadley was there. 3 months post-stroke, walking with a slight limp, his left hand still weaker than his right, but alive and sharp and standing in the California sun. He'd come to watch Marcus's first official test flight. He wouldn't fly again himself, the doctors had been clear, but he'd insisted on being in the control tower. "How do you feel?" Hadley asked. "Like I'm going to throw up." "Good. The day you're not nervous is the day you stop respecting the machine." Hadley put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Listen to me. I was unconscious for most of what happened that night. But I've read the reports. I've talked to Rachel, to Lisa, to every person on that aircraft. What you did wasn't just flying. It was the kind of flying that reminds people why we do this, why any of us do this. I was terrified the entire time." "Of course you were. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Marcus. It's the decision that something else matters more. My daughter, your daughter, and 15 strangers who are alive because a janitor stood up when no one else could." Derek Lawson had flown in from New York for the occasion. He stood at the fence line with Rachel and Emma and a small crowd of Meridian employees. He wore jeans and work boots, no suit, no tie, no Escalade. He'd transferred to Meridian's manufacturing division 3 weeks after the crash, working on the factory floor, learning how the planes he'd spent years selling were actually built. "Figured if I'm going to tell people our aircraft are the best in the world," he'd told Marcus over the phone, "I should probably know which end the wing goes on." Lisa Nguyen stood beside the test aircraft, a modified Gulfstream with experimental avionics that Meridian needed evaluated under extreme flight profiles. She was Marcus's assigned safety pilot for the test program, fully recovered, fully certified, and fully unwilling to let anyone else sit in the right seat. "Ready, Webb?" she asked. "Born ready." "Liar. You look like you're about to pass out." "That's just my face." She laughed and climbed into the right seat. Marcus walked around the aircraft, performing the pre-flight inspection he'd done 1,000 times in another life. Tires, control surfaces, engine intakes, fuel caps. His hands moved with the certainty of ritual, each check a prayer, each touch a promise. He climbed into the left seat, buckled the harness, placed his hands on the yoke. No shaking, no trembling,
just the quiet, steady grip of a man who'd come home. Meridian test, this is test flight 1, requesting clearance for departure. Hadley's voice came through the radio from the tower, warm and rough and alive. Test flight 1, you are cleared for takeoff, runway 25. Winds calm, sky is clear, it's a beautiful day to fly, Marcus. Roger, tower, test flight 1 rolling. He pushed the throttles forward. Both engines spooled to full power. The Gulf Stream accelerated down the runway, smooth and strong and hungry for the sky. Emma's voice echoed in his head. Fly, Daddy. Jake's voice joined it. Let's go make the impossible look routine, brother. Marcus pulled back on the yoke. The wheels left the ground. The aircraft climbed into the blue California sky, engines singing, wings catching the sun. He was flying. Not running, not hiding, not surviving from one gray morning to the next. Flying. 4 years ago, Marcus Webb had walked away from the sky because he believed he didn't deserve it. He put on a gray uniform, picked up a mop, and become invisible. He'd let the world look through him because he couldn't stand what he saw when he looked at himself. Then a plane broke. 2 pilots went down, and a CEO who'd never learned his name screamed the question that changed everything. Can anyone fly this? Marcus Webb had stood up. The janitor, the father, the ghost. And he'd answered. He'd answered with his hands on the yoke and his daughter's face in his mind and his dead co-pilot's voice in his ear. He'd answered by flying a broken plane through a storm, landing it in the wilderness, taking off from a field that was too short, and landing again on 2 wheels with 16 souls who'd walked away alive. He'd answered the way he'd always answered. Not with words, not with credentials, not with the approval of people who'd never bothered to see him. With action, with courage, with the quiet, unshakable refusal to let the people who depended on him down. And now, climbing through 10,000 feet in a clear sky, with the desert below and the horizon ahead, and the whole impossible future stretching out before him, Marcus Webb knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was never going to be invisible again.